Twilight Masquerade gave us a powerful lineup of EX cards based around the flagship Pokemon of the Teal Mask DLC, Ogerpon, a Pokemon that is inspired by the Japanese folk tale of Momotaro, or Peach Boy, a story about a boy born from a peach who travels alongside a dog, monkey, and a pheasant in order to fight a band of evil Oni. These characters are also referenced in the DLC as Pecharunt, Okidogi, Munkidori and Fezandipiti, the latter three referred to as the Loyal Three. But in the story of the Teal Mask, the roles have been swapped. The Peach Boy and his companions are the villains, while the Oni is the hero. The Loyal Three did receive their own cards as well in Twilight Masquerade, each of them being different types like the Ogerpon cards, but they all had an ability that worked in tandem with darkness energy being attached to them, even though none of them are darkness type. I personally thought Okidogi would see the most play out of the three, but instead, Munkidori has taken the spotlight instead of a couple of decks, thanks to its ability to move damage counters from your Pokemon to your opponents. Shrouded Fable is going to be our next set releasing this year in August. However, it isn't our next main line set, and is instead a side set. This set will be giving a spotlight to the villains of the Teal Mask, each of them receiving their own EX card boasting powerful attacks and abilities, as well as a very unique playstyle that personally, I have not yet seen done in the Pokemon TCG, though I've only been playing for a few months, so I could be completely wrong. Anyway, let's take a look at all four of these Pokemon, determine if any of them are good or bad, and how they could function as a deck or as individual cards. Let's start off with the leader of the bunch, Pecharunt EX, a 190 HP Darkness type Pokemon boasting an ability and an attack. This ability reads, once during your turn you may switch one of your benched Darkness Pokemon, excluding any Pecharunt EX, with your active Pokemon. And if you do, your new active Pokemon is now poisoned. You can't use more than one Chain of Command ability per turn. This ability upon first read sounds pretty good. You basically get a free switch of your active Pokemon with a benched Pokemon. No need to discard energy cards for retreating or use an item or support card. However, there are three downsides to this effect. The most noticeable one being, your new active Pokemon is now poisoned, meaning that between turns, if the Pokemon is still in the active, it will take 10 damage, and that could unknowingly help your opponent in knocking it out depending on the Pokemon. However, the bigger caveat is that this effect can only switch your active with a benched Darkness type Pokemon, meaning that you can only play this card in a Darkness type deck, or in the very rare occasion a deck that uses Darkness type Pokemon, making the card very deck specific. And then the third downside is that the ability can only be used once per turn, even if you have multiple Pecharunt in play. Even with these downsides, we've yet to look at the other Loyal Three members themselves, so the fact that the ability poisons your active could actually help, depending on what the abilities and attacks of the other three members do. Pecharunt's own attack requires 2 Darkness Energy and does 60 damage times the number of prize cards your opponent has taken. The attack doesn't do any damage by itself and requires your opponent to have taken at least 1 prize. However, in the late game, this attack is really strong. If your opponent has taken 4 or 5 prize cards, that means you can hit for 240 to 300 damage, which is huge. Add on certain tool cards such as Defiance Band or Expert Belt, and those numbers will grow higher and higher. I imagine the other 3 members will rely on this card in some way, given that it's the leader, so the poison infliction could end up being pivotal to the deck strategy. Next up is Okidogi EX, a 250 HP Darkness type Pokemon with 2 attacks. Its first attack for 1 colourless doesn't do any damage, but does help in powering itself up for future turns. Breeding, search your deck for 2 basic Darkness energy and attach them to this Pokemon. If you attached any energy this way, this Pokemon is now poisoned. Being able to attach 2 energy straight from the deck is very powerful, and given that the attack itself costs an energy, that means Okidogi is now all powered up and you can start using its second attack next turn. The only downside being, Okidogi is now poisoned, so it will be taking bits of extra damage every turn. However, the poison actually isn't a big downside when we take a look at this second attack. For 2 Darkness and 1 colourless, it does 130 damage, but if this Pokemon is poisoned, this attack does 130 more damage. Hitting for 260 damage while poisoned is very powerful, allowing for Okidogi to one-hit KO almost any basic Pokemon, even if it's a V or EX. It can also KO through certain tool cards that boost HP. The downside of taking poison damage every turn will add up over time, but it can be slightly mitigated with your own tool cards to give Okidogi more HP. Or, if you want to be hyper aggressive, dealing even more damage, as coming in the same set is a brand new tool card called Binding Mochi, which reads, the attacks of the poison Pokemon this card is attached to do 40 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. This card brings Okidogi's damage all the way up to 300, which is enough to knock out V-Star Pokemon and some Evolution EX Pokemon. An incredibly powerful attacker for the deck, and Darkness decks in general, since it can poison itself, meaning you don't have to rely on Pecharunt. The second of the loyals is Munkidori EX, a 210 HP Darkness type Pokemon with an ability and an attack. Its ability reads, if this Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack while you have a Pecharunt EX in play, your opponent takes one less prize card. This ability isn't bad, it does require you to have Pecharunt EX in play, but if you do, then Munkidori is now a 1 prize Pokemon. Slap on a Legacy Energy and now it's a 0 prize Pokemon. That's good and all, but what does the attack do? It has the same cost as Okidogi, being 2 darkness and a colourless, and deals 190 damage, but it can't use the attack again next turn. This attack is decent, 190, and then if you poison it and attach a Binding Mochi, it will turn into 230. The only issue being the cost of free energy, so it will take time to power up, given that Okidogi can only attach energy to itself. So Dark Patch will definitely be a staple in this deck. Compared to Okidogi, it's good, not as powerful, but it can deal some decent damage while also being a single prize Pokemon with the right setup. And last but not least is Fezandipiti EX, a 210 HP Darkness type Pokemon with an ability and an attack. Its ability reads, if one of your Pokemon was KO'd during your opponent's last turn, you may draw 3 cards. You can't use more than 1 Take Advantage ability per turn. This ability is more powerful than you'd think, allowing you to draw some extra cards if one of your Pokemon was KO'd. The bonus being that, unlike Munkidori, you don't need Pecharunt in play, which also means it can be used in pretty much any deck as a good draw support. However, you can't use more than 1 of its ability per turn, so if you have 2 Fezandipiti in play, you can only use the ability on 1 of them, similar to Pecharunt's ability. But being able to draw 3 cards after a knockout, especially if your opponent forced you down to a small hand size during their turn, is really good. Its attack is also very generic and easy to fulfill. For 3 colourless energy, it reads, this attack does 100 damage to 1 of your opponent's Pokemon. Giving decks a strong bench sniper is also very powerful, helping you hit bench support Pokemon for a quick KO or to slow down your opponent. A very good card and a very generic card at that. I expect to see this card being played in other decks besides the Loyal Free deck, being a nice piece of draw support as well as a strong bench attacker. These cards all have their ups and their downs. They are all very powerful on their own, but when combined together, that power is only heightened. You have a super strong attacker, a single prize attacker, a draw support and bench attacker, as well as a free switcher and endgame beater. The only issue this deck has is the lack of energy acceleration. Okidogi can only accelerate energy onto itself, so your other Pokemon will need the help of supporters, item cards and other engines in order to get themselves powered up. However, those types of cards are rare for Darkness Pokemon specifically. Dark Patch off the top of my head is the only piece of Darkness support, so I'm not really sure how this deck...
Hold on!
Breaking news! It took me so long to make this video, because I'm lazy, that a new support card for Darkness decks was announced that will help this deck with its energy acceleration issues. That card being Janine's Secret Technique, a support card that reads, choose up to 2 of your Darkness Pokemon. For each of those Pokemon, search your deck for a basic Darkness energy card and attach it to that Pokemon. If you attached any energy to your active Pokemon this way, that Pokemon is now poisoned. Being able to accelerate energy from the deck is very strong, plus the fact it also poisons the active just helps in getting the status condition into play without having to use Pecharunt or Okidogi. Also, the card is just a generic piece of Darkness support, since you can attach the energy to your benched Pokemon, meaning that they won't be poisoned, helping other decks such as Roaring Moon and Ancient Box, since the only other form of energy acceleration the deck has is Dark Patch, as well as Sada's Vitality, but that card requires you to get energy into the discard first. Overall, the Loyal 3 are a very unique series of cards. Each of them have their own strengths and weaknesses, but they all have the benefit of not being tied down to a specific deck, and for some, a specific type of card. The exceptions being Munkidori, since its ability requires you to play Pecharunt, and Pecharunt itself, since its ability can only move Darkness Pokemon. But the others are much more generic and can be played in other Darkness type decks, or in the case of Fezandipiti, any deck. Okidogi is a super powerful attacker that can accelerate energy onto itself and poison itself to increase its damage, while Fezandipiti can draw you cards after a knockout as well as attack benched Pokemon. The leader, Pecharunt, is a free switch for your Darkness type Pokemon at the expense of poisoning them. However, for Roaring Moon and Ancient Box, Ancient Booster will prevent that since they can't be affected by special conditions. Plus, its attack can hit for huge damage in the late stages of the game. Will these cards see play as their own deck? We will just have to wait and see. The set list for Shrouded Fable won't be revealed for the next few days, so there could be some extra pieces of support we have yet to see. Will these cards see play in other decks? Definitely. On their own, these cards are all very powerful in some aspects, but when combined together, they could prove to be a very troublesome group.